How does a skint second division club find a striker at such short notice? Laurie devised a cunning plan. He posted a message on CEEFAX.
My agent saw the Wickham site on CEEFAX, and obviously with their injuries and everything and me not being cup-tied, he got on the phone to Laurie Chancellors and they had a chat, and he asked me to come down and play a couple of reserve games.
As CEEFAX substitute striker Roy Essandoh took up a position in the box,
It's Essandoh! The player who's only on a week-to-week contract. This is an incredible story, even by the standards of the FA Cup.
I'm Carl Natural, and this is Teletext People, a social history into the blocky medium that dominated our TV screens right up till its close down in 2012. In this episode, Ian Westbrook of the BBC, who was CEEFAX's last ever sports editor. Ian shares with us some tales of his time at BBC CEEFAX. I started by asking Ian how his career at CEEFAX began.
Okay, so I joined the BBC. I'd always wanted to work for the BBC, and I joined the BBC in what was the old cashiers department. And what we did was we used to pay out wages in cash for a lot of the staff and expenses and travel money and that sort of thing. But I always really wanted to get into the journalistic side of it. And growing up, I was a massive fan of CEEFAX, because being a Brentford supporter, the only way you could actually get any news about Brentford other than the weekly paper was on CEEFAX. So my favourite page was the Football News in Brief page 312, and I was writing a column for the Brentford programme about news in the third division where we were playing at the time. So any signings and stuff like that I'd note down from CEEFAX in a notebook for my programme column. So the BBC staff newspaper called Ariel used to advertise jobs, and in 1992 there was a job advert to join CEEFAX. So by this stage, I had started doing journalism outside the BBC. I was reporting for a local paper on Brentford away matches. So with that on my CV, I applied for this job and I got an interview. And I was quite relaxed about it. So I actually did a good interview. And I didn't get the job, but they said to me, "We're impressed with what you've done. Do you want to come and do sort of extra shifts for us?" So for 2 years then, as well as my normal 9 to 5 job at the BBC, I was doing some weekend and evenings working on CEEFAX, and that was mainly doing the football scores, everybody's favourite pages. So the way that worked was the scores literally came in on a paper teleprinter, and there were, say it was a normal Saturday of all the 4 divisions playing in England, so you'd have 1 division per person, and somebody would rip these goal flashes off the video printer, give them to you, and you would literally type them in by hand, and then update the page. So I did that, and I did some other, I think I did some shifts on cricket and other sort of live scores rather than news shifts. And then in 1994, a permanent job came up on CEEFAX again, and I applied for that, and I got the job. And so I joined CEEFAX full-time in January 1994 as probably the most junior member of the sports desk. And it went from there. Yeah, so as a freelancer, really, I said I was just doing score shift. But once you joined the desk, you were doing all sorts of things. You were writing news stories, which I wasn't really doing before, as well as all the statistical stuff, and working on a shift pattern. So the shifts were 4 10-hour shifts a week, including weekends. You did a couple of weekends a month, early shifts, late shifts, middle shifts. So you might be starting the coverage off. So CEEFAX was staffed 24/7. So there were people doing CEEFAX news overnight, but sport was only staffed during the day. Well, say from I think 6 in the morning to 11 at night, something like that. But obviously when live sport was on, that changed. So for example, people worked overnight doing Ashes tests and Olympics from if they're in the States or whatever. So yeah, it was writing news stories, doing team news, doing more featurey things. And more excitingly, I got to go to some outside broadcasts. So the first outside broadcast I ever went to was the World Snooker in Sheffield. I went with someone who'd quite experienced, been before. So I think I was there the first time for a week. So we were the most popular people in the press room at the Crucible, because back in those days, in the mid-90s, the only way of getting live football scores on a Saturday afternoon was by watching CEEFAX or Teletext. And if you imagine you're working in a press room at a sports event and you've got people working on CEEFAX there, we were quite popular. So you'd have all the players, it was very relaxed at the snooker. The players used to come into the press room quite a lot and sit around. So we'd have snooker players and other journalists coming to our desk saying, "Oh, what's the Liverpool score? What's the Brentford score?" Looking over our shoulders, looking at the latest scores page, obviously, which we could access. At the work we did at the snooker was we would do everything was mainly by hand. So we were typing in latest scores match by match at the World Snooker. So mainly in the press room, you could go into the arena occasionally, but you had to be at your desk to update the score. So we'd get a feed. We'd have little TVs in our desk. You'd watch each game, and as each frame finished, you put the score in. You weren't updating it shot by shot, but you'd have the score, and obviously in the match results, we'd have results pages and draws pages, and also be writing a 4-paragraph report as well. Once the idea of anything was to get something done, on the whistle or as something finished. So say at the snooker, as that final ball was sunk, you had to have a 4-par report ready, bang, to go up. And then you go into the press conference and you get quotes. And the idea of CEEFAX pages was that each 4-paragraph page, as you know, pages are in subsets. You might have, say, on a snooker match, 4 pages. So each page was self-contained. So 4 paragraphs is about 80 to 90 words. So say it was a snooker match and you'd have a report and quotes from both players. The first page would be a report, what happened. The second page might be quotes from the winner. But on that page, if somebody put their TV on and lands on page 2 of 4, they need to know what happened in the match. So you'd have a paragraph saying, after Ronnie O'Sullivan beat Stephen Hendry 15-11, he said he was delighted with his performance or whatever it was, and then 3 paragraphs of quotes. And then the Stephen Hendry page would be the same, because someone might land on that page straight away. So Stephen Hendry said he was disappointed to lose Ronnie O'Sullivan, and then the quote, and the last page would be the score. That was quite exciting. Being at a major event, that was brilliant. I also went to some golf events in the early days. Went to, I think it was the PGA at Wentworth I went to, where again, you're doing the live scores and reports in a similar way to the snooker. I can't remember the exact year, went to Wimbledon. I went to Wimbledon probably at least a dozen times over the years. So my first memory of going to Wimbledon was we were doing latest scores at Wimbledon from all the courts. It's about 15 courts then. And we were literally in an underground bunker below the old number 1 court. So I think there were 4 or 5 of us there on shift. And you had a row of TV screens showing the matches. And above that, you had the internal scoring system at Wimbledon, showing each court. So say one person would do, say, courts 1 to 4, someone would do 5 to 8, etc. So you're looking up and down at the screen, updating it game by game for all these matches. And it was exciting being at Wimbledon, but you're underground with no windows and looking up and down. You end up with a massive headache at the end of the day, but it was great to be there. And then you'd also get to write match reports and quotes on that as well. And so as time went on, I sort of managed to progress up the ladder, if you like. I went from being a junior journalist to a senior journalist. And then I became the deputy sports editor. The BBC Sport website was founded in about 2001, and the CEEFAX Sport team at the time, there were 8 of us, and there was a regional sport team. These pages, the 390 pages started, there were 8 of them. Probably half the team went over to the website, which left us obviously quite short of people, including the CEEFAX Sports editor. I became the CEEFAX Sports editor after that move happened, and we got some new people in. So I can say I was the last ever sports editor of CEEFAX, because in 2004 we merged with the website. So they merged the operating system. What it meant was, and it's still true now, if you look on the red button text on digital TV, that the first 4 paragraphs of a website story all went on CEEFAX. If you read a website story, the top 4 paragraphs were still self-contained. Everything would be in there. Say a football report, top 4 would tell you what you needed to know. And the CEEFAX pages were created from that top 4. And then for the web, you knew what they said, like a joining 5th paragraph. So you might say, Brentford beat Wigan 3-0 to move top of League One. So-and-so scored the first, and the 4th. Then you have a 5th par, which wasn't on CEEFAX, which should say the result means the Bees are 3 points clear at the top or whatever. And then you go into a bit more detail. In the second minute, this happened. So you'd have this linking paragraph to link the self-contained 4-par report with the rest of your web copy. So the move was a bit, it took a bit of time, because there were some people who joined the website when it started who weren't used to writing stuff in 4 pars, because the freedom of writing for a website. So there was a bit of a process, but it happened and it worked in the end. So I then moved from being the CEEFAX Sports editor to an assistant editor on the website. And then I left sport when I moved to Salford in 2011. So as I said, I was very lucky to do a lot of outside broadcasts for CEEFAX. Wimbledon was probably my favourite. I said I was there at least a dozen times. And I managed to negotiate as a seat that the website team still operate now, because once the new number one court, the old number one court was demolished and that basement disappeared, thank heavens, we moved into the new broadcast centre which was built, desks in there. What we really wanted was try and get on centre court. And centre court, as you know, has got all these commentary boxes around, I think it's the middle or the third level. So we managed to negotiate with the press team there to be given some space in the commentary box, 2 sort of windows next to each other. They have these rooms, you go around the corridors. We managed to negotiate 2 windows. And I think the first year we were there, the technology wasn't quite up to it, because the BBC has got its own village, if you like, at Wimbledon. I certainly used to have when I was working there. And we managed to eventually get onto the BBC circuit, which meant it was just like working in the office. And then we had the scores automated, which was a big relief. So the scores were all done off the IBM feed that fed Wimbledon. So that was great. So the people who were at Wimbledon then could concentrate on doing reports. So obviously you have somebody reporting on the match that we were watching on front and centre court. Somebody else might go out with the press ticket onto number one court and report. Plus, it was the start of the live text pages, which obviously everyone knows on the website. So, we were doing stuff for CEEFAX and for the website. People were feeding into the live text pages. Yeah, so I was very lucky to be at Wimbledon all those times. Long days. I mean, it's great. Working at Wimbledon was great, but you were there because of the scores. You need to be there well before play starts and until play is finished. So, but I'm not complaining about working there. The other place that's really evident was the Open Golf. So I think I went to 7 or 8 Open Golf Championships for CEEFAX. And we did have automated scores there. But again, you had to set it going, and there were various ways of coding players. So although it did work, there were things you still had to do. So the Open Golf, particularly on the first 2 days, play tends to start at 6:30 in the morning and can go on till 9 o'clock at night, because they've got 128 players, I think it is. So again, long days, and you only really got to go out on the course in the first couple of hours, because once you came in, there were 2 of you there. You were writing reports. Players were finishing all the time. You were writing report after report. Once the CEEFAX regional service was there were 4 of us there, and we had people interviewing every single English player who came off the course. Because if you think there's 11, 12 regions around the country, they all wanted reports. So if you had a Northampton golfer, we would do 4 pars on him. Or you had a golfer from Suffolk, a report on him. So we had people there. We must have done, I think, each day, maybe 70 to 80, certainly the first 70 to 80 sub-pages of stuff to read. So that was full on, and again, I'm not complaining. Long days, but brilliant to be there, even though most of the time was spent in the press tent. And everyone knows who you are. CEEFAX is very well respected. By this stage, people get football scores elsewhere, so they weren't crowding around our terminals for that. But I did the Commonwealth Games manager in 2002. I did the end of that, which was great. Obviously, very different. That was more about reports.
Just a reminder that if you're listening to this on your favourite podcast app, you can also find this on the YouTube channel. And if you are watching on YouTube, you can find us on your favourite podcasting app. You can find out ways that you can help with the show in the show notes. So with the skills that you've picked up working for CEEFAX so long, do you still look at things today and manage to look at the world in 3 paragraphs plus an explainer?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. I mean, I think sometimes people have got short attention spans, haven't they? You look at Twitter and TikTok and all these things. People just want things in 2 minutes. If you had a 4-paragraph report, I think that would work really well. I don't think the readership of digital text is that high anymore. Some people don't even know it's there, to be honest. So, yeah, you do tend to look at things a bit like that. I mean, CEEFAX was much loved, although I talk to people now, younger people about it, they don't know what it is, they don't understand what it is. But, yeah, you look at things, try and look at things concisely, definitely.
Were there any sort of stories? I've heard a story of a football manager, I think it was a Queen's Park Rangers manager, find out he got a sack via CEEFAX, but I'm not sure how true that is.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, Bruce Rioch found out he was sacked via reading it on CEEFAX. That is true. There was also the famous Roy Essandoh, the Wycombe striker. Now, I actually took the call that day from Wycombe's press officer, who phoned us up and said, look, we're really short. They were in the FA Cup quarter-finals. We're really short of players. Is there any way you could put a paragraph on your News in Brief page saying we need a striker? So we put this up, and Roy Essandoh's agent saw the story, and he signed for Wickham and scored the winning goal for them against Leicester, simply because they'd read that paragraph on CEEFAX. So some of the other things that happened were Glenn Hoddle's daughter once sent in a fax defending her dad after he got a load of stick when he was England manager. And also there's a football manager who I won't name who once rung our previous sports editor before me in the middle of the night to complain about a story we'd put up about him on CEEFAX. And also one year I was at the Open Golf and a player accused us of misquoting him. I won't name the player, but what used to happen was they'd hold press conferences for some of the players, particularly in the last couple of days, but they couldn't do it for everybody. So what used to happen was that the officials would interview certain players at the end of their rounds rather than having a press conference and print out the quotes and put them in a tray at the back of the press tent, and you could just go and get a copy of whichever ones you needed. So we wrote up quotes in this particular player, and I think he said something like he'd disappointed finish and he was going to take a rest and not play in the next week's tournament. Anyway, half an hour after we published the story, there's a tannoy announcement saying, "Can somebody from CEEFAX come to the front desk, please?" So I went to the desk, and this player's agent was standing there, and he said, "Look, he's read your piece, he's very unhappy, that's not what he said at all." So I brought the guy over to our desk and handed him the printout and said, "Well, he did say this, here's what he said, and we've correctly quoted him word for word." And Bloke apologised because his player had misinformed him and we hadn't done anything wrong at all. One of the big motivations away from outside broadcasts was the rivalry we had with ITV Teletext. Obviously we were doing the same thing, and the big motivation was to get stories up before they did. Obviously not making things inaccurate in our rush to get things up. But for example, say a manager was sacked or a game finished or a signing was made, we used to have on two big TVs in the office, our headlines page 301, their headlines page, I think it was 140, and the big joy was getting the story out first, beating them to the story. I don't know if websites really have the same motivation now, as there's so many rivals out there, but really it was just us and them doing sports news. So that was a big thing, to beat them to stories. And also we were a very, very close-knit team. I mean, there are only 8 of us, as I said earlier, on the sports desk. And the friends who I've still got from work now are all people I work with on CEEFAX. We worked together, we believed in what we did. And because everybody used CEEFAX, at its height, 20 million people a week used it. Everybody knew CEEFAX. Everyone knew the page numbers for sport. 301 for the headlines, 302 for football. You knew what division you were in, what page your team's league table was, 324 Premier League, 325 Championship, etc. So it was just, you were proud to work for something that everybody used and that you probably used yourself as well. Certainly I did as a kid.
Well, yeah, I often remember being off sick and going through all the pages of CEEFAX and Oracle just to see what was there. But I do remember sort of 12 pages of results from the UEFA Cup preliminary rounds, and I think I read all of them on CEEFAX as well. So the amount of information that you were gathering in and producing for people, it was educating people as well as telling people who were seeking the information, telling them what they needed to know. It was doing both things at the same time.
That's right, and also in those days, before we were, I like to say, the internet before the internet existed. If you came in from a match and wanted to know that day's scores, etc., and tables, unless you lived in a city that did an evening paper, like Saturday Night Pink or whatever it was, the only way to get all that information was to use CEEFAX or the ITV equivalent. It was all there. You could go through the scorers in each division, the tables, the results and attendances, the match reports and quotes. It was all there. Everything was there for you, totally free, just on your TV, sit down on the sofa, a cup of tea and go through it all. And it was there. It was what people wanted and people used it. And it was a brilliant service, really brilliant service. But there's still some people who work on BBC Sport Online who were at CEEFAX and who understand what people want. So, for example, if you look on the BBC Sport app now, it's got a show scorers button. So if you want to see all the results and scorers, you can do that. So I think certainly stats-wise, it mirrors CEEFAX. The people who work there still understand what people want to see. I think the live text is a totally different thing that we didn't really have in the days of CEEFAX. I think still, the match reports on the website have changed now. They're not necessarily 4 paragraphs telling you everything. So stats-wise, I'd say yes. Live text-wise, probably not. But it's not designed to be like that. It's not a criticism. It is a different thing, the live text.
And earlier on, you alluded to your rivalry with Oracle and then teletext services after that. Was there any time where you sort of like may have made a mistake and it got replicated on the other service because they were perhaps copying?
You have to have trusted sources when you're producing, copy and stuff. So the Press Association was a trusted source. But if the Press Association said Smith scored the third goal for Chesterfield, then we both had taken that. So it would look wrong on both services, even though the person at the ground actually got it wrong and it was Jones. So probably not copied from us, but we could both have made the same mistake from using the same source. So the way it works is the Press Association are supposed to check facts before they send them out. And if you look at things today, the newspapers and websites, but if you're getting like stuff you see in a paper or obviously now you see it online, stuff wouldn't necessarily go up straight away from a non-trusted source. You need a second source. Obviously, you've got a BBC reporter, then you've got someone to attribute it to. But yeah, I mean, we wouldn't put stuff up on a chance. Stuff would only go up if we were 100% sure it was correct. And that's the same today with the website.
With the teletext tables, the league tables and things, were there any particular challenges with having to make corrections, or if if points were deducted, did it give you formatting errors that you had to make an extra page? Did that sort of like annoy you?
I mean, it was a bit frustrating because the tables became having been done by hand initially, they became automated. So when things like points deductions happened, the team's points show up correctly, and it wasn't always easily possible to put in like an asterisk and a line saying so-and-so deducted 10 points for going to administration or whatever. So yeah, that was frustrating because people would look. Sometimes they find ways around it, but you would sometimes have tables showing someone got 10 points even though they've won 10 games without being able to explain it properly to people. So yeah, that was one frustration. But you had to have these tables. The amount of time to type out a table manually was so long. These things had to be automated. One thing that people doing TV didn't like about CEEFAX was our live scores. If they were doing a highlights program later, so again, I don't want to name a name, but somebody working on the snooker once rang us up because we were doing live scores on a match, and TV was showing it as live about half an hour behind, and had a highlights program up, and they rang us up at the Crucible to say, "Can you stop doing the live scores? You were going to ruin the viewing for our highlights program." As you can imagine, we said no to that request. And then you get people writing in and saying, "Oh, yeah, why have you got the results on your page? Match of the Day's on tonight. I don't want to know what the scores are." So the answer to that is, don't put on CEEFAX.
Don't press the text button. That's
exactly. It's easy. And then we had a letters page. You used to get letters in the post back in the day from people. Various sort of odd points about either coverage or teams. And there were just so many. It was just a brilliant time. It was the ups and downs. It was a brilliant time to be there.
Oh, that's excellent. It must have been a sad day when you finished at CEEFAX.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I said so. First of all, there was the merger in 2004 with the website. So CEEFAX, although it existed on your TV, we were in a separate department. And then when I finally left BBC Sport, because the move to Salford happened in spring and summer 2011, and for various, in my case, family reasons, but 50% of the team didn't go. So actually leaving BBC Sport was a very sad day. I mean, I'm now back in the BBC working BBC News, but that was very sad.
It's but obviously a lot of positive memories as well.
Definitely. Listen, as I said to you, it's the best job I've ever had working on CEEFAX Sport, and I'm proud to have worked there and played a part in its history. I mean, the service is started 48 years ago. This month, in fact, October. So big anniversary coming up in a couple of years' time.
You have been listening to Teletext People. Teletext People is presented by me, Carl Attrell, and is a Bite High No Limit production.